Why does it seem like every Arab country hates Iran? It's easy to say religion, or history, or ancient rivalries, but that's not what keeps Gulf capitals awake at night. The Persian Gulf is a dichotomy. The gleaming skyscrapers of Dubai, Riyadh, and Doha, all backed by trillions in oil wealth and US alliances. Opposite them is a resilient Tehran, a sanctioned state that learned how to survive without any of it. But this isn't ancient hatred, it's a modern power struggle where cheap drones beat billion-dollar defenses, ideas threaten kingdoms, and one narrow stretch of water could choke the global economy. The fear in Arab capitals isn't that Iran will invade with tanks, it's that Iran has figured out how to win without them. Nothing illustrates this better than the events of September 14, 2019. This was the moment the theoretical threat became a physical reality. At 4 a.m., the Abqaiq oil processing facility in eastern Saudi Arabia was the single most valuable industrial site on Earth, processing nearly 70% of the kingdom's oil output. It was protected by the Skyguard air defense system, Shaheen surface-to-air missiles, and Patriot batteries, all designed to shoot down high-altitude jets and ballistic missiles. Minutes later, the facility was struck by a swarm of low-flying drones and cruise missiles. In less than 20 minutes, half of Saudi Arabia's oil production was taken offline. 5% of the global oil supply disappeared in a plume of black smoke. The attack was claimed by rebels in Yemen, but intelligence assessments from Washington and Riyadh pointed directly to Iran. It was a harsh moment of realization. Saudi Arabia had spent hundreds of billions on defense, and it didn't matter. This wasn't about oil, it was about vulnerability. The Arab states are built on a fragile model. Their power comes from stability, uninterrupted oil exports, calm markets, foreign investment, and secure shipping lanes. Their cities sit exposed on coastlines. Their water comes from desalination plants. Their wealth flows through chokepoints. Iran is built differently. Decades of sanctions and isolation have forced it to become self-reliant. It does not rely on foreign investment or tourism. Instead, it relies on missiles, drones, and militias. Because the roots of this conflict don't start with technology, they start with identity. And if you like these map dives, subscribe and help me justify hours spent staring at the same desert over and over. Many Iranians identify as Persian, not Arab, and that difference matters. Iran doesn't just want influence, it believes it's the heart of the region. Just to get it out of the way, Iranians don't speak Arabic. They speak Farsi, an Indo-European language closer to English than the dialects of Riyadh or Cairo. But the divide runs deeper than language. Since 1501, Iran has been the center of Shia Islam, the minority in the Muslim world. On a map, you can literally trace where the Shia populations are located, and that matters. Around 85 to 90% of Muslims are Sunni. The Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, they're Sunni states. Yet there are still large Shia populations in Saudi Arabia's oil-rich eastern province and in Bahrain, where a Shia majority is ruled by a Sunni king. To Arab rulers, this wasn't theology, it was a fault line. For centuries, that divide was manageable. Even the Shah of Iran, a Shia, was a secular monarch. He drank with Western leaders, did business with Saudi kings, and wanted stability, high oil prices, and the suppression of communism. Arab monarchs didn't like him, but they understood him. Then came 1979. The Islamic Revolution didn't just change Iran's government, it changed the nature of the state. Ayatollah Khomeini rejected monarchy itself as un-Islamic. He looked across the Gulf at kings and emirs and told them their time was up. His revolution wasn't just for Iran alone, it was for the entire world. For Saudi Arabia, this was a declaration of war. The Saudi state draws its legitimacy from guarding Mecca and Medina and views Shiism as heresy. Suddenly, a revolutionary theocracy next door was claiming to lead the Islamic world. The fear was that Iran would invade with ideas, not tanks. Khomeini argued that legitimacy came from clerics, not kings. Iran's leaders spoke directly to Shia communities across the Arab world, bypassing their governments. They encouraged protest and resistance. Unrest erupted in Saudi Arabia's eastern province in 1979. Bahrain saw repeated waves of Shia protest in the decades that followed, blamed on Iranian agitation. Whether Iran orchestrated every incident didn't matter. To Arab rulers, the message was clear. Iran had weaponized identity. This turned Iran from a rival state into an existential threat. The moment Iran became chaotic and revolutionary, its neighbors saw an opportunity. That opportunity came in Iraq. In September of 1980, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. Officially, it was a border dispute. In reality, Saddam feared Iran's revolution would inspire Iraq's Shia majority to turn on him. For the Arab monarchies of the Gulf, Saddam was brutal, but he was useful. They made a cold calculation. Iran was revolutionary, Saddam was familiar, so they chose Saddam. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf states poured billions of dollars into Iraq's war chest. They effectively bankrolled Saddam's war machine. It kept the Iraqi economy afloat while tanks rolled across the border. The war lasted 8 years, nearly 1 million dead. And Iran? They never forgot the lesson. When Iran bleeds, the Gulf writes the check. This belief became embedded in Iran's strategic culture. Iran emerged from the war exhausted, paranoid, and permanently suspicious of its neighbors. But it also developed a core belief that still shapes everything it does today. Iran would never allow itself to be boxed in and attacked like that again. But it wouldn't respond by building a traditional army. It would respond by changing the battlefield entirely. Instead of projecting power with armies, it would project influence with networks. Instead of defending borders, it would fight far from home. Iran invested in asymmetric warfare. It trained militias, it funded political movements, it embedded itself inside fragile states. The goal was simple: make it impossible to confront Iran directly without triggering chaos and bloodshed everywhere else. The first and most successful example of this strategy emerged in Lebanon. During Lebanon's civil war in the early 1980s, Iran sent Revolutionary Guard advisors into the Bekaa Valley. They helped organize a new Shia militia. That militia was Hezbollah. At first, it was small, but it didn't stay that way for long. Iran provided funding, weapons, training, and ideological guidance. Over time, Hezbollah became more powerful than the Lebanese government itself. More importantly, it has over 150,000 missiles and rockets, with its own command structure, communication networks, and foreign policy. Lebanon cannot go to war without Hezbollah's approval. For Sunni Arab states, this was the nightmare that became a reality. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq and overthrew Saddam Hussein. For Iran, this was a geopolitical earthquake. Its most dangerous enemy was gone, eliminated by Iran's greatest adversary, and Iran moved fast. They flooded the country with intelligence officers, religious scholars, and funding for local militias. Today, the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq are a collection of militias, many of which are openly loyal to Iran's supreme leader. Iraq became both a buffer and a launchpad. For Saudi Arabia and Jordan, this changed everything. Iran was no longer across the Gulf, it was on their border. With influence in Iraq secured, Iran pursued something unprecedented: a continuous corridor of influence stretching westward. They call it the Land Bridge, a route that runs from Iran through Iraq into Syria and onward to Lebanon. Through this corridor, Iran can move weapons, personnel, and supplies without relying on airspace or sea lanes vulnerable to interception. For the first time in modern history, Iran had direct access to the Mediterranean. The Arab states were encircled. Saudi Arabia looked north and saw Iranian influence in Iraq. Jordan looked east and saw Iranian-backed militias near its border. Israel looked north and saw Hezbollah growing stronger by the year. Iran had turned geography into leverage. If the northern front was a slow burn, the southern front was an explosion. Yemen shares a long, porous border with Saudi Arabia. It's poor, rugged, and historically unstable. In 2014, the Houthi movement, a Zaidi Shia group from the northern mountains, seized the capital, Sana'a. Zaidi Shiism isn't the same as Iran's Shiism. The Houthis' alignment with Tehran was strategic, not doctrinal. They shared a common enemy with Iran, the Saudi-backed government and the United States. Ballistic missiles, drones, and anti-ship mines were smuggled into Yemen. Panicked, the Saudis launched a massive air campaign in 2015 to restore the government. They expected a quick victory. 7 years later, the Saudis were still stuck in a quagmire. The Houthis didn't just survive, they struck back. They began firing ballistic missiles deep into Saudi territory, targeting airports in Riyadh and oil facilities in Jeddah. The war revealed a harsh reality. Even the richest Gulf states couldn't win decisively in Yemen. A Patriot missile interceptor costs approximately $3 to $4 million per shot. A Houthi drone, assembled in a garage with Iranian parts and a lawnmower engine, costs between $2,000 and $20,000. The economics of the war were unsustainable. The psychological impact on the Gulf states can't be overstated. For decades, they believed that their massive wealth and their alliance with the West made them untouchable. Yemen proved that Iran could bleed them dry and terrorize their cities, all without ever firing a shot from Iranian soil. This creates a layer of plausible deniability that prevents a direct war while achieving all the strategic effects of one. If a missile hits a Saudi oil refinery, Iran denies involvement. They claim it was a local Yemeni resistance action. The world knows the technology came from Tehran, but without hard proof, it's difficult to launch a full-scale invasion of Iran in response. This isn't just a military alliance, it's a demographic weapon. The Arab states look at their own populations and see potential fractures, an internal threat. Bahrain, a Shia-majority island ruled by a Sunni monarchy, embodies that fear. In 2011, protests erupted demanding reform. The Gulf Cooperation Council didn't see a domestic movement. They saw an Iranian plot. Saudi tanks rolled across the King Fahd Causeway to crush the uprising. Whether Iran was actually involved mattered less than the fear that it might be. Every protest in Saudi Arabia's eastern province or unrest in Kuwait is viewed with the same optics. This is the encirclement. In every direction, there are Iranian proxies. However, the ultimate leverage isn't land-based, it's maritime. The Strait of Hormuz is the choke point. At 2 miles wide at its narrowest, it carries 20% of the world's oil and a third of seaborne LNG, roughly 20 million barrels a day. Most of that oil originates from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iraq. It's the economic lifeline of the Arab world. Without the ability to export through this strait, the economies of the Gulf Cooperation Council would collapse almost immediately. Their entire national model relies on the free flow of tankers out of the Gulf. Iran controls the northern coastline of the strait. It overlooks the shipping lanes from high, rugged mountains that are ideal for concealing coastal defense batteries. For decades, Iran has relied on swarms of fast boats, midget submarines, and mines, a small investment that can paralyze global trade. This is Iran's nuclear option without needing a nuclear weapon. If the Arab states or the United States were to attack Iran directly, Tehran has repeatedly threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. Even the threat of doing so causes insurance rates for shipping to skyrocket. It costs billions of dollars in economic damage to their neighbors. It's a form of economic warfare that targets the very foundation of the Arab monarchies. So why does this geography dictate the entire Arab strategy? The Gulf monarchies have spent the last 30 years transforming themselves from quiet desert kingdoms into global hubs for tourism, finance, and trade. Cities like Dubai, Doha, and Riyadh rely on foreign investment, open borders, and calm markets. You cannot host the World Cup or build the Burj Khalifa in a war zone. But these nations have a critical vulnerability that is often overlooked: water. Saudi Arabia and the UAE rely almost entirely on desalination plants for their fresh water. These are massive industrial facilities sitting exposed on the coastline, adding to the vulnerability. Iran, however, has built what its leaders call a resistance economy. Decades of isolation have forced the country to adapt to hardship. Its infrastructure is less centralized, and its population is accustomed to rationing and economic volatility. In a war of attrition, Iran is better prepared to absorb the damage than the interconnected economies of the Gulf states. This imbalance explains why the Arab nations have pushed so aggressively for the United States to maintain a massive naval presence in the region. They need the US Fifth Fleet to guarantee the safety of the strait. They know they can't secure it alone against the geographic advantage Iran holds. But if the Strait of Hormuz is the conventional threat, the nuclear program is the existential one. This is the issue that moves the conflict from a regional Cold War to a potential global crisis. For years, Iran has insisted its nuclear program is entirely peaceful, intended for energy and medical research. The Arab states and most Western intelligence agencies don't believe this. They point to the numbers. This is why Gulf capitals panic. 60% enrichment isn't energy, it's a countdown. Estimates for Iran's breakout time to produce enough fissile material for a single nuclear weapon are now measured in weeks, not years. So what happens if Iran crosses the threshold? If Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, the strategic calculus of the Middle East changes permanently. A nuclear-armed Iran would be immune to invasion. It would ensure the survival of the revolutionary regime indefinitely, just like nuclear weapons have preserved the regime in North Korea. It would allow Iran to support its proxies in Yemen, Lebanon, and Iraq with total impunity. And for Saudi Arabia, this is a red line. The Saudi leadership has explicitly stated that if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, the kingdom will acquire one as well. This raises the terrifying prospect of a nuclear arms race in the most unstable region on Earth. Intelligence reports suggest Riyadh has contingency plans to acquire nuclear capabilities quickly through allies. Pakistan is a nuclear-armed Sunni ally whose program the Saudis helped finance decades ago. It's a nuclear guarantee, paid for in oil and cash. Imagine a standoff in the Persian Gulf similar to the Cold War between the US and Soviet Union, but with critical differences. In the Cold War, there were red phones and diplomatic back channels to prevent accidental escalation. Between Riyadh and Tehran, there is almost zero trust and very little direct communication. The flight time for a missile from Iran to Riyadh is less than 5 minutes. In a crisis, leadership would have virtually no time to verify a threat before deciding whether to launch a counterstrike. So where does this end? The status quo is violent and unstable, but it's held for nearly half a century. The Middle East is drifting from proxy wars into a far more volatile mix of internal unrest, nuclear brinkmanship, and regional escalation. The first pressure point is inside Iran itself. Many Arab states are quietly betting not on war, but on a regime change. The protests that swept Iran in 2022 and 2023 exposed a deep fracture in the Islamic Republic. A younger generation, born long after the 1979 revolution, has no attachment to the ideology of the state. They're tired by the corruption, strict religious enforcement, and watching the national wealth flow to militias in Lebanon and Yemen, all while inflation wipes out their savings. Arab media networks and social media platforms hope the domestic unrest will weaken Tehran's ability to act regionally. But that strategy comes with risk. A wounded regime is a dangerous one. If the leadership in Tehran feels its power slipping, it may decide that a foreign conflict is the only way to unite the country. The second possibility once seemed unthinkable. In March of 2023, Saudi Arabia and Iran restored diplomatic ties, with Beijing rather than Washington as the mediator. Embassies reopened. The tone softened, but few see this as peace. It's more like a pause. Saudi Arabia is undergoing an economic transformation. Vision 2030 is pouring billions into projects like NEOM and hosting major sporting events. But you can't attract tourists if missiles are flying overhead. Iran, meanwhile, is suffocating under sanctions and needs regional trade to stay afloat. Both sides are buying time, not abandoning their strategies. The proxy networks, the sectarian narratives, and the nuclear centrifuges remain. Which leaves the third, and most likely, outcome, a structural Cold War that never truly ends. The hostility toward Iran isn't just about sect or ethnicity, it's about intent. The Arab monarchies are status quo powers. They want stable borders, open shipping lanes, and the map to remain intact. Iran is a revolutionary power. It wants to redraw the map and establish a new order with Tehran at its center. As long as that belief endures, and as long as global energy flows through a narrow stretch of water, the rivalry will persist until it doesn't. One miscalculation in the strait, one strike that can't be denied, and the whole region can light up.
Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.